Officer Rodriguez thought he was about to watch amateur hour when the 19-year-old approached his witness stand. Instead, he became the star of a masterclass on how to dismantle 2 decades of bad policing in under 30 minutes. Picture this. It's 8:57 on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona. The courthouse is buzzing with the usual crowd, lawyers in expensive suits, police officers straightening their uniforms, and family members clutching tissues, hoping for the best. The marble floors are polished to perfection, reflecting the morning sunlight streaming through tall windows. Everything looks official, intimidating, and very, very serious. Then the heavy wooden doors swing open, and in walks someone who changes everything. Her name is Chen. She's 19 years old, and honestly, she looks even younger. As she steps into that courtroom, her black Converse sneakers make this soft squeaking sound against the marble floor. It's the only sound anyone hears because, let me tell you, every single person in that room stops talking and stares. Nobody knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. Nobody could have predicted that this teenager in thrift store clothes was about to turn their entire world upside down. See, Maya didn't look like any lawyer they'd ever seen. While everyone else wore polished leather shoes that clicked authoritatively across the floor, Maya's sneakers whispered. While other attorneys carried gleaming briefcases and the latest laptops, Maya had one thing, a thick, worn binder tucked under her arm. Her outfit told its own story. Charcoal slacks she'd bought from some resale app for probably $20. A faded navy blazer with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows like she was ready to get her hands dirty. Her long black hair was pulled back in the simplest ponytail you can imagine. No fancy styling, no attempt to look older or more sophisticated. No makeup, no jewelry, no games. This was Chen, exactly as she was, walking into a room full of people who were about to learn that appearances can be the most dangerous kind of lie. The whispers started immediately. You know how it is, that buzz of confusion that ripples through a crowd when something doesn't fit their expectations. People leaned toward each other, eyebrows raised, trying to figure out what they were looking at. Is that someone's daughter? Maybe she's here for career day. Who let a kid in here? Maya heard it all. But here's the thing about Maya that nobody in that courtroom understood yet. She had learned to turn their doubt into her strength. Every whisper, every stare, every assumption was just fuel for what she was about to do. Judge Martinez took his position at the bench. He was the kind of judge you'd expect in a serious courtroom, silver-haired, experienced, with the gravitas that comes from decades of seeing everything the legal system has to offer. He looked down at the scene unfolding before him with the expression of a man who wasn't quite sure if he was witnessing a practical joke. Maya walked through the bar, that wooden barrier that separates the real lawyers from everyone else, and settled at the defense table like she belonged there. And maybe that's what was so unsettling to everyone watching. She didn't hurry. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to make herself smaller or less noticeable. She just belonged. With methodical precision, Maya opened her binder and organized her materials. She flipped to a tab labeled Rodriguez, Cross. Everything about her movements said the same thing. I know exactly why I'm here, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. That's when the opposing attorney noticed her. He was probably a decent guy, just confused by what he was seeing. He leaned over with the kind of polite concern you'd show to someone who was clearly lost. He said, trying to be helpful, "This table's reserved for counsel." Maya didn't even look up from her preparations. Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, like she was stating the obvious. "I am counsel." You could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as he tried to process this information. He looked her over again, the sneakers, the thrift store blazer, the face that could have belonged to any college sophomore. "Wait," he said, and now there was something different in his voice. Not condescension exactly, but genuine bewilderment. "You're handling the cross-examination today." Maya finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were calm, clear, completely unbothered by his shock. "Yes." That single word carried so much weight. It wasn't defensive or aggressive. It wasn't trying to prove anything. It just was. Chen was handling the cross-examination, and that was that. But before anyone could fully absorb what was happening, a voice cut through the courtroom atmosphere like a knife. "Is this some kind of student court program?" The words came from Officer Samuel Rodriguez, and let me tell you about Rodriguez. He was exactly what you'd picture when someone says veteran cop, white, mid-40s, with arms crossed and an attitude that filled the room. This was a man who wore his authority like armor, who had spent 23 years on the force and thought he'd seen everything. Rodriguez embodied every stereotype of the old-school officer who believed respect was something you demanded rather than earned. He was the kind of guy who probably wore mirrored sunglasses on cloudy days and used his badge like a conversation-ending trump card. He turned to the court officer beside him with this theatrical chuckle, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. "What is this, debate club?" And just like that, scattered laughter rippled through the gallery. Some people genuinely found it funny. Others laughed because everyone else was laughing. But all of that laughter fed Rodriguez's confidence, made him lean back in his chair like he was settling in to watch amateur hour. This is where most people would have cracked. This is where most 19-year-olds would have felt their cheeks burn with embarrassment, would have looked around for support, would have maybe even considered backing down. Chen clicked her pen once, made a single notation in her binder, and waited. The patience in that moment was extraordinary. Maya understood something that everyone else in that room was about to learn the hard way. Composure is a weapon more powerful than indignation. Silence can be more devastating than shouting. And sometimes, the best response to mockery is to let your work speak for itself. Judge Martinez cleared his throat. You could see the uncertainty in his expression. Was this an elaborate prank? Some new legal education initiative he hadn't been informed about? The situation was unprecedented in his courtroom, and he wasn't quite sure how to handle it. But Maya had been patient long enough. She stood up. The movement was fluid, graceful, completely unhurried. Her voice carried no attempt to sound older or deeper than it naturally was. She didn't try to artificially project authority or intimidate anyone with forced gravitas. "Your Honor," she said, and her voice was exactly what it was, young, clear, and absolutely certain. "Defense is ready to proceed with cross-examination." The declaration sent a ripple of surprise through the courtroom. This wasn't a student exercise. This wasn't career day. This wasn't some kind of educational demonstration. This was real. Officer Rodriguez's smirk faltered for the first time. His eyes narrowed as he began to realize that maybe, just maybe, this girl might have something up her sleeve. The laughter from the gallery died away, replaced by something else entirely, anticipation. Maya approached the witness stand with measured steps. Not rushed, like she was nervous. Not stiff, like she was overcompensating. Just steady, confident, purposeful. Like she'd done this dance 100 times before. Even though this was only her third open-court cross-examination. "Officer Rodriguez," she began, her tone conversational yet precise, "you've been with the Phoenix Police Department for how long?" Rodriguez straightened in his chair, trying to regain some of his earlier swagger. 23 years, he replied, and you could hear the pride in his voice. 23 years of experience versus one teenager with a binder. "Excellent," Maya nodded, consulting her notes with the calm of someone who had studied every detail. "That means you're thoroughly familiar with standard protocols during routine traffic stops, correct?" "Obviously," Rodriguez responded, and there was still that barely concealed condescension in his voice. Like he was talking to a child who was asking why the sky was blue. But Maya's next words would begin dismantling not just his testimony, but his entire approach to law enforcement. "Good," she said, flipping through her organized materials, "because I'd like to review a specific stop, the one involving my client on March 15th. The courtroom atmosphere shifted in that moment. People sat up straighter. Phones disappeared into pockets. Even the opposing counsel leaned back in his chair like he was preparing to watch a performance he hadn't expected to enjoy. Everyone could sense it. Something significant was about to happen. Rodriguez rolled his neck like he was stretching for a workout, still confident this would be over quickly. Still certain that experience trumped preparation, that authority mattered more than evidence, that a veteran cop couldn't be challenged by a teenager with sneakers and a second-hand blazer. Maya opened her binder to the exact page she needed. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had studied every frame of body camera footage, every line of departmental policy, every word of Rodriguez's own report. She looked up at the officer who had mocked her just minutes before, and smiled. Rodriguez was about to learn that sometimes, the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person you should fear the most. The real show was just beginning. What happened next in that Phoenix courtroom wasn't just a cross-examination. It was a masterclass in preparation meeting opportunity, in quiet determination dismantling loud arrogance, in truth finally getting its day in court. Maya stood there with her worn binder, facing a man who had spent more than 2 decades believing his badge made him untouchable. Officer Rodriguez still had that slight smirk on his face, still thought this was going to be easy. After all, what could a 19-year-old possibly know about real police work? He was about to find out. Let's talk about the stop involving my client on March 15th, Maya said, her voice carrying that same calm authority that had surprised everyone from the moment she'd walked in. You stated in your report that you clearly observed him running a stop sign, correct? That's right, Rodriguez replied, settling back in his chair like a man who knew his story and was sticking to it. Maya nodded and pulled out a photograph, a still frame from Rodriguez's own body camera footage. She held it up for everyone to see. This image shows your patrol car's position at the time of the alleged violation. You were facing east on Parker Road, behind two SUVs that partially blocked your view of the intersection. You could see Rodriguez's confidence flicker for just a moment. But he recovered quickly. I could see well enough. That wasn't my question, Maya replied, her tone still conversational but now carrying an edge of precision that cut through the air. At that angle, with those two vehicles in front of you, could you clearly see whether my client came to a complete stop? Rodriguez hesitated. For the first time since this whole thing started, he actually hesitated. The man who had been so sure of himself, so quick with his dismissive comments, suddenly needed a moment to think. I judged it the best I could, he finally said. That wasn't my question either, Maya replied calmly. Could you clearly see it? Yes or no? The silence stretched. Everyone in that courtroom was holding their breath. Even Judge Martinez leaned forward slightly, waiting for the answer. Not completely, no. Those 4 words hit the courtroom like a thunderbolt. Maya had just gotten a 23-year veteran to admit that the foundation of his entire case, his claim that he clearly observed a traffic violation, was built on an assumption. Not facts, not clear observation, an assumption. But Maya wasn't done. Not even close. She flipped to the next section in her binder with the methodical precision of someone who had planned every single question, every single moment of this examination. Let's move to the body camera audio, she said. Around the 1-minute 12-second mark, you said, and I quote, his twitchy, probably high. Is that correct? Yes, Rodriguez said, but now his voice was a little tighter. Did you conduct any field sobriety tests on my client? No. Did you perform a drug screening or request one? No. Maya let those answers hang in the air. The courtroom was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. So on what basis did you determine he was probably high? Rodriguez shifted in his seat. The swagger was gone now, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that every word he had spoken, every assumption he had made, was being held up to the light for everyone to see. He was fidgeting, looking around, Rodriguez said, his voice lacking the confidence it had carried just minutes before. Did he ever raise his voice during the stop? No. Did he threaten you in any way? No. Did he refuse to show identification? No. Did he refuse to comply with any of your requests? No. Maya paused, letting the silence stretch. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but devastating. So your conclusion that he was probably high was based solely on the fact that he was nervous during a police stop? Rodriguez opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he say? That yes, he had made a career-altering assumption based on normal human behavior. That he had profiled someone based on fidgeting. Maya continued her systematic destruction. She pulled out more evidence, Rodriguez's own report where he claimed to have observed a bag under the passenger seat that he suspected contained contraband. But the body camera footage showed him asking what's in the bag, without ever pointing a flashlight toward the seat or crouching down to look. How did you observe this bag? Maya asked. I saw something dark under there. A shadow. I assumed it was a bag. But you wrote in your official report that you observed a bag. Not that you assumed there might be one. You stated, as fact, that you observed contraband packaging. Maybe I was mistaken. Maya nodded slowly. Maybe you were. Each admission was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Every question revealed another layer of sloppy police work, another assumption passed off as fact, another shortcut that had real consequences for real people. But Maya still wasn't finished. She was building to something bigger, something that would expose not just this one stop, but a pattern of behavior that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Officer Rodriguez, she said, consulting her binder again, in your 23 years on the force, have you ever been formally disciplined for misconduct? The question hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. His jaw worked silently, and for a moment, it looked like he might not answer at all. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the silence. Answer the question, officer. Rodriguez took a breath that everyone in the courtroom could hear. Yes. Once. 10 years ago. What was the nature of that disciplinary action? An excessive force complaint. His voice was barely above a whisper now. Was it dropped? It was resolved. Maya nodded and pulled out another document. I'd like to read from the Phoenix Police Department Procedural Manual, revised just last year. Section 5.3, Suspicion-Based Stops. She cleared her throat and read aloud. All stops based on observed behavior must be clearly articulated and supported by specific actions observed by the officer at the scene. Subjective feelings or instincts are not grounds for initiating a search. She lowered the document and looked directly at Rodriguez. You wrote that my client was fidgeting, glancing around, and looked nervous, correct? Correct. None of those are illegal behaviors, are they? No. And you did not observe a weapon, contraband, or any direct threat before initiating the search? No. Maya flipped to another section of her binder, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Yet in the body camera footage, at timestamp 4 hours 19 minutes and 8 seconds, you said, quote, he fits the type. They always act the same way when they've got something to hide. The courtroom didn't breathe. Every person in those wooden benches leaned forward, straining to catch every word of what was unfolding before them. Fits the type, Maya repeated, her voice slower now, letting each word sink in. That's what you said. Rodriguez said nothing. What could he say? The words were right there on tape, in his own voice, revealing exactly the kind of thinking that had driven this entire stop. You're sure that's all you meant? Maya asked. Because just a few seconds later, you said, just like the last kid, jumped like a rabbit when I reached for my belt. Still nothing from Rodriguez. The confident, mocking officer who had entered this courtroom was gone, replaced by a man who was finally being held accountable for words he'd spoken when he thought no one important was listening. Maya turned toward Judge Martinez. Your Honor, what we're establishing here is a pattern. Not one supported by department guidelines or legal protocol, but by profiling, by assumption, and by clear violations of Section 5.3 of the department's own policies. She turned back to Rodriguez. Are you familiar with case number J204 from 6 months ago? Same precinct. Rodriguez frowned, clearly not wanting to go down this path. Refresh my memory. Maya smiled, not mockingly, but with the satisfaction of someone who had done her homework. You stopped another young Latino man. Similar neighborhood. And your report used remarkably similar language. Twitchy. Glanced around. Looked like he had something to hide. She held up 2 documents side by side. The descriptions are nearly identical. Different people, different days, but the same assumptions written in the same words. I don't know what you're implying, Rodriguez said weakly. I'm not implying anything, Maya replied. I'm stating facts. Was anything illegal found in that stop? No. Was a complaint filed? Yes, but... Was it dropped? Rodriguez's voice was barely audible now. No. Maya stepped back from the witness stand, and for a moment, the courtroom was absolutely silent. Everyone could feel it, the shift in power, the moment when truth finally broke through years of unchallenged authority. Is it standard procedure for you to use nearly identical language across different incidents when the behavior you're describing isn't illegal and no violations are found? I don't know. Maya tilted her head slightly. You don't know? Rodriguez tried to recover some ground. Sometimes you develop pattern recognition. You get a feel for who's hiding something. There it was. The admission that Maya had been building toward through every question, every piece of evidence, every careful revelation. I believe we covered this, officer, Maya said, her voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. Your department policy doesn't accept feelings as justification for searches or stops. Rodriguez said nothing. What could he say? Maya had used his own words, his own footage, his own department's policies to build a case so airtight that there was no room for excuses or explanations. Maya turned toward Judge Martinez. Your Honor, what we've established today is that this stop lacked any legal foundation. Officer Rodriguez not only misrepresented his ability to clearly observe the alleged violation, but also conducted a search based entirely on subjective assumptions about my client's appearance and behavior. This isn't about experience versus youth. It's about accountability. But Maya saved the most devastating revelation for last. She returned to her binder one final time, flipping to a page she had been saving for this exact moment. When she looked up at Rodriguez, there was something different in her expression, not anger, not triumph, but something deeper. Disappointment, maybe. or sadness for what this moment revealed about the system she was trying to change. "Officer Rodriguez," she said quietly, "did you know my client is a high school mathematics teacher at Lincoln Middle School?" Rodriguez's head jerked back like he'd been slapped. "No. You didn't ask." "No. Did you inquire where he was coming from or going to?" "No. Didn't seem relevant." Maya nodded slowly, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of every assumption, every stereotype, every lazy shortcut that had brought them to this moment. "So, to be absolutely clear, the stop, the search, and the citation were all based on a traffic violation you couldn't clearly see, assumptions about behavior that isn't illegal, and a feeling about someone whose profession, character, or circumstances you never bothered to investigate." She walked toward the jury box, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You saw a young Latino man in a hoodie driving an older car, and you wrote his story before he ever had a chance to tell it himself. You didn't wonder if maybe he'd had a long day teaching algebra to sixth graders. You didn't consider that maybe his nervousness came from being pulled over while doing nothing wrong. You decided he fit the type, and that was all the justification you needed." Maya turned back to Rodriguez one last time. "You've been doing this job for 23 years, officer. But what concerns me most is how confident you were that no one would question your report. How certain you were that no one would hold you to your own department's standards. How sure you were that your assumptions would go unchallenged." The silence that followed was deafening. Rodriguez stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the edge of the witness stand. The smirk was gone. The casual arrogance was gone. All that remained was a man confronting the reality of his own actions, stripped of the authority that had protected him for so long. Maya returned to her seat. "No further questions, Your Honor." Her co-counsel leaned over and whispered, "That was surgical." Maya whispered back, "It was necessary." The prosecutor attempted a redirect examination, but it was too late. Every question he asked only highlighted the holes Maya had punched in Rodriguez's credibility. After a few minutes, Judge Martinez waved him off. "Let's move to closing arguments," the judge said, his tone suggesting that he, too, had heard enough. Maya's closing argument was simple, direct, and devastating. She reminded the jury of what they had seen and heard: body camera footage showing a cooperative citizen, an officer operating on assumptions rather than evidence, and a complete absence of the probable cause required by law. "Feelings aren't evidence," she told the 12 people who would decide her client's fate. "They don't give you permission to rewrite facts, skip protocols, or abandon basic respect. My client was profiled, searched, and cited because someone couldn't be bothered to ask who he was before deciding what he was." The jury deliberated for exactly 70 minutes. When they returned, the 4 persons stood and delivered the words Maya had been fighting for: "We find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted in whispered conversations and scattered applause. Rodriguez sat motionless, staring at nothing. Maya shook her client's hand, a high school math teacher named Carlos who had spent months wondering if his career would survive this encounter with Officer Rodriguez's assumptions. "Thank you," Carlos whispered, his voice cracking. "I thought this was going to destroy everything." Maya smiled. "You're still standing. That means we won." Within hours, video of Maya's cross-examination had exploded across social media. Someone in the gallery had recorded key moments, and the clips were spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. The caption that launched Maya into national recognition was simple: "She's 19. He's been a cop for 23 years. Guess who came prepared?" Comments flooded in from legal professionals, civil rights advocates, and ordinary citizens amazed by what they had witnessed. But Maya wasn't interested in viral fame. When reporters asked how it felt to win such a high-profile case at her age, her response was typically direct: "It doesn't feel like a win until the system stops giving officers like Rodriguez the benefit of the doubt and starts giving people like my client the benefit of the truth." Officer Rodriguez was placed on administrative leave within a week. The Phoenix Police Department quietly announced a review of his previous cases, particularly those involving stops of young men of color. It wasn't the dramatic reckoning that some people wanted, but it was accountability, real, measurable consequences for years of questionable policing. Maya returned to her routine with the same quiet determination that had brought her to that courtroom in the first place. She continued taking pro bono cases, teaching legal workshops to high school students, and building a reputation based on preparation rather than publicity. At a youth legal program in Scottsdale, she shared the philosophy that had guided her through that Phoenix courtroom: "You're going to walk into rooms where people think you don't belong. Don't waste time trying to prove them wrong. Just prove yourself right. When a student asked how she stayed calm under pressure, Maya's answer revealed the wisdom that had carried her through Rodriguez's mockery. They laugh when they feel safe. I don't give them that luxury. Maya's story became more than just a viral video or a legal victory. It became proof that the system could change, one case at a time, when someone was willing to do the work. Her success inspired other young attorneys to take on cases involving police misconduct, showed high school students that age didn't have to limit ambition, and reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most powerful force in any room isn't experience or intimidation. It's simply the courage to demand truth and the preparation to prove it. Months later, Maya established a practice specializing in civil rights violations, accepting cases that other attorneys considered too difficult or unprofitable. Her approach remained constant: meticulous preparation, respect for evidence, an unwavering commitment to holding authority figures accountable. The young woman who had walked into that Phoenix courtroom in sneakers and a thrift store blazer had proven something that would echo far beyond her individual victory. She had shown that competence mattered more than appearance, that preparation could overcome prejudice, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be exactly what the system needs to change. Maya Chen's name became synonymous with fearless advocacy and quiet excellence. Her legacy would inspire a new generation of lawyers who understood that justice wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic speeches. It was about showing up prepared, demanding accountability, and never accepting that things have to stay the way they've always been. In the end, Maya's story proved that revolution doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it walks into a courtroom in squeaky sneakers, carries truth in a worn binder, and changes everything with nothing more than the right questions asked at the right time by someone brave enough to ask them. Sometimes the person everyone laughs at becomes the one everyone remembers.